Ethan Walker was an ordinary 17-year-old, quiet and reserved, the kind of boy who never drew too much attention to himself. He lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to happen. Days passed in a blur of routine, school, homework, and occasional outings with friends. But beneath the surface of his seemingly normal life, something far more dangerous was unfolding, something that would shatter the peaceful illusion of the town. A few houses down from where Ethan lived, Claire Dawson carried on with her life as a devoted wife and mother of two. She was 35, beautiful, and always well put together, the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. To most, she appeared to have the perfect life, a hard-working husband, 2 happy children, and a comfortable home. But behind closed doors, Claire felt suffocated. The years had dulled the excitement in her marriage, leaving behind an emptiness she couldn't ignore. When she crossed paths with Ethan, she never imagined he would become the answer to her restlessness. It started off innocently enough. Ethan mowed lawns during the summer to make extra money, and Claire had hired him a few times. At first, they exchanged nothing more than casual pleasantries, small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, the mundane details of daily life. But soon, their conversations grew longer, more personal. Ethan found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. She wasn't just another adult. She was different. She laughed at his jokes, listened to him in a way no one else did, made him feel important. Claire, too, felt something shift. She knew it was wrong, but she couldn't help the thrill that ran through her when Ethan was around. He was young, eager, and most of all, he looked at her in a way her husband no longer did. What started as harmless flirtation quickly spiraled into something far more dangerous. The first time Ethan kissed her, it was in the dim light of her garage as he was putting away the lawnmower. She didn't stop him. That night, lying in bed next to her husband, she replayed the moment over and over again, feeling alive in a way she hadn't in years. From that point on, there was no turning back. Their meetings became more frequent, more reckless. They stole moments whenever they could, whispered phone calls, secret touches, late-night encounters in darkened parking lots. Ethan was intoxicated by her, by the way she made him feel. He had never experienced love before, and in his mind, that's exactly what this was. Claire, on the other hand, saw it differently. She was fully aware of the danger, fully aware of what was at stake. But the fear only made it more exciting. As weeks passed, Ethan's infatuation deepened. He wanted more than stolen moments and hidden kisses. He wanted Claire to leave her husband, to be with him, and only him. But Claire had no intention of giving up her life for a teenager. Ethan refused to accept that. What had begun as an exhilarating secret was quickly turning into something far more dangerous, something that would soon spiral out of control. Ethan. Walker had never felt anything as intense as what he felt for Claire Dawson. The secrecy, the stolen moments, the way she smiled at him when no one else was looking. It consumed him. Every waking thought was about her, and every night he lay awake replaying their encounters. But something was changing. The excitement that once fueled their affair was turning into desperation. Claire had begun pulling away, and Ethan could feel it. At first, it was subtle. Her replies to his texts became shorter, delayed. The playful tone in her voice was replaced with hesitation. She no longer asked him to meet her at their usual spots, no longer lingered outside to catch a glimpse of him passing by. Ethan tried to ignore the signs, convincing himself that she was just being careful. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. Then, one evening, everything fell apart. Claire called him, her voice calm but firm. She told him that they needed to stop, that what they had was a mistake. Her husband had grown suspicious, asking questions about where she had been, why she seemed distant. It was too risky, she said. She couldn't do it anymore. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his hands shaking as he gripped his phone. He begged her to reconsider, told her he would be more careful, that they didn't have to stop. But Claire wouldn't budge. She told him it was over, that he needed to move on. Then, just like that, she hung up. Ethan sat in stunned silence, staring at the screen of his phone. His mind refused to accept what had just happened. How could she walk away so easily? How could she act as if everything they had meant nothing? His body trembled with anger, his heart aching with betrayal. Claire was his, and she had no right to end things without his permission. The following days were unbearable. Every time Ethan saw Claire in the neighborhood, acting as if nothing had happened, his rage grew. She smiled at her husband, played with her kids in the yard, carried on as if she hadn't been sneaking around with him just weeks before. It made his blood boil. How could she erase him from her life so effortlessly while he was drowning in heartbreak? Ethan became obsessed. He started watching Claire from a distance, memorizing her every move. He knew when she left the house, when she returned, when she was alone. The more he watched, the angrier he became. She wasn't heartbroken. She wasn't suffering like he was. It was as if he had never existed. One night, as he lay in bed, unable to sleep, a dark thought took root in his mind. If Claire thought she could erase him from her life, she was wrong. He wasn't going to let her forget him. He wasn't going to let her move on as if nothing had happened. If he couldn't have her, no one could. Ethan Walker's obsession with Claire Dawson had transformed into something far more dangerous. What once felt like love now burned inside him as resentment, a deep and uncontrollable anger that refused to fade. He could no longer focus on school, his grades slipping as his mind remained consumed with thoughts of her. Every time he saw Claire laughing with her husband or playing with her children in the yard, it felt like a personal betrayal. She had moved on so effortlessly while he was left drowning in heartbreak. The pain was unbearable, but soon it turned into something else, revenge. At first, Ethan only thought about hurting her in a way that would make her regret leaving him. He fantasized about ways to make her life difficult, to expose her secrets, to humiliate her in front of everyone she cared about. But no plan seemed satisfying enough. Nothing he imagined could make her feel the same level of pain he was feeling. And then, the idea struck him. The only way to truly make her suffer was to take away everything she had. He spent days studying Claire's routine, carefully planning each step. He knew her husband, Daniel, often traveled for work, and would be gone that weekend. He knew her children were staying with their grandparents for a few days. Claire would be home alone, vulnerable, unprotected. It was the perfect opportunity. On Friday night, Ethan prepared himself. He dressed in dark clothing, making sure to wear gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. He slipped a kitchen knife into his backpack, his fingers tracing its handle as he imagined what he was about to do. He felt a strange sense of calm, as if all the chaos in his mind had finally settled. Tonight, everything would be made right. The streets were quiet as Ethan made his way toward Claire's house. He knew the backyard gate was never locked. Slipping through it, he crept toward the back door. His heart pounded, but his hands remained steady. He reached for the handle, turning it slowly. It was unlocked, just as he had hoped. The house was silent as he stepped inside, the only sound coming from the distant hum of the refrigerator. The living room was dimly lit by a small lamp, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself before moving toward the stairs. He knew Claire was in her bedroom. He had watched her turn off the lights just an hour ago. With each step, his grip on the knife tightened. His mind raced with memories of her laughter, her touch, the way she had once looked at him with desire. But all of that was gone now. She had thrown him away like he meant nothing. Reaching the top of the stairs, he paused outside her bedroom door. His heartbeat was deafening, his breath shallow. This was it. There was no turning back. Slowly, he pushed the door open, stepping inside as Claire slept peacefully, completely unaware that her worst nightmare had just entered the room. The dim glow from the bedside lamp cast long shadows across the room. Claire Dawson lay curled beneath the blankets, her breathing soft and steady, unaware of the danger standing just feet away. Ethan Walker's heart pounded against his ribs, his grip tightening around the handle of the knife. For a moment, he hesitated, his mind flickering back to the first time he had kissed her, the way she had once looked at him with warmth. But that version of Claire no longer existed. She had discarded him, erased him from her life, as if he had meant nothing. The thought reignited his rage, and any lingering hesitation vanished. As he took a step closer, the wooden floor beneath him creaked. Claire stirred, letting out a quiet sigh as she shifted in bed. Ethan froze. His breath hitched, and his muscles tensed, waiting to see if she would wake. Seconds stretched endlessly, but she remained asleep. He exhaled slowly, then moved forward again, positioning himself at the side of the bed. His pulse roared in his ears as he raised the knife. Just as he prepared to strike, Claire's eyes fluttered open. For a split second, confusion clouded her face, but then she saw him, standing over her, dressed in black, a knife in his hand. Panic erupted in her wide eyes, and she gasped, scrambling backward. Ethan lunged, but she kicked out, knocking his arm just as he brought the blade down. The knife slashed into the mattress instead, and Claire rolled off the bed, landing hard on the floor. Adrenaline surged through Ethan as Claire scrambled to her feet, her breathing ragged, eyes darting around the room in terror. She tried to run, but Ethan was faster. He grabbed her by the wrist, yanking her back. She clawed at his arms, kicking and thrashing, her nails raking against his skin. Fueled by desperation, she twisted free and lunged for the bedroom door. Ethan reacted instantly, grabbing her by the hair and pulling her backward. Claire screamed, but he clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling the sound. They struggled violently, knocking over a lamp, sending it crashing to the floor. The room was plunged into darkness, except for the faint glow from the hallway. Claire fought with everything she had, but Ethan was relentless. He shoved her onto the bed, pinning her down as she thrashed beneath him. His hands trembled as he raised the knife again, and this time, There was no mistake. The blade sank into her flesh, and a choked gasp escaped her lips. She writhed beneath him, her body convulsing as she tried to fight back. Blood pooled onto the sheets, soaking into the fabric. Ethan stabbed again, and then again, his movements fueled by blind rage. Claire's struggles weakened, her breath coming in ragged gasps until finally she went still. For a long moment, Ethan remained frozen, his chest heaving, the knife still clenched in his blood-stained hands. The room was silent except for the pounding of his own heart. The reality of what he had done began to settle in, a cold wave of horror crashing over him. Claire was gone. There was no taking it back. Panic gripped him as he stumbled away from the bed. His hands were shaking, his mind racing. He had to leave. He had to get out before someone found him here. Moving quickly, he wiped the knife clean and stuffed it back into his backpack. He stepped over the broken lamp, his shoes slipping slightly on the blood-slicked floor. Without looking back, he rushed down the stairs, slipping out the back door, the same way he had entered. The night was eerily quiet as he ran through the backyard and disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind the lifeless body of the woman he had once loved. Ethan Walker ran through the darkness, his breath ragged, his heart hammering against his ribs. His hands trembled, still slick with Claire's blood. His mind screamed at him to stay calm, to think, but all he could hear was the echo of her final gasps, the sight of her body lying still on the bed. The gravity of what he had done crashed over him in waves, but there was no time for regret. He had to cover his tracks. He slipped into his house through the back door, careful not to wake his parents. In the bathroom, he scrubbed his hands raw, but the imaginary stain of blood refused to wash away. His clothes were soaked with it, evidence of his crime clinging to him like a curse. He stuffed them into a plastic bag, shoving it deep into his backpack. His mind raced. Where could he get rid of them? He couldn't throw them in the trash. Someone might find them. The river. Yes, the river. It was miles away, but if he got rid of the clothes and the knife there, no one would ever trace them back to him. For the next few hours, Ethan moved mechanically, driven by panic. He rode his bike to the outskirts of town, where the river cut through the woods. The sun was beginning to rise as he hurled the bag into the rushing water, watching as it disappeared beneath the surface. It was done. He had erased the evidence. He just had to act normal now, as if nothing had happened. But normal wasn't possible. The moment Claire's body was discovered, the entire neighborhood was thrown into chaos. Police swarmed her house, yellow tape sealing off the crime scene. News spread like wildfire. A brutal murder in their quiet town. Claire Dawson, a beloved wife and mother, slain in her own bedroom. There was no sign of forced entry, no clear suspect. People whispered theories, but no one knew the truth. No one suspected Ethan.